Hey, good evening. Good evening. This is technically a lunch and live, but wherever you are in the world, on this beautiful day of Tuesday, I hope that you are finding peace and joy and love, and that whatever time this message finds you, maybe you'll be catching some just a bite to eat. I'm Chandra, and I am covering part four, actually, of about the causes of shame. So we've been talking about shame and what it does to us as God's chosen, what it does to us in life, and what it does to us in general. I started out this session talking about the definition of shame. I talked about some of the symptoms of shame, which I'm going to actually go over because it is a lengthy list. Today, I want to talk about, kind of pivot and talk about the causes of shame. And I am going to be looking at my screen a little bit here. So, if I'm not technically looking at the camera, please forgive me. I'm also have my phone with me as I go through some of these notes. And today is a wonderful day. I'm actually waiting on my son to get done with practice. So I wanted to make sure that I did at least come on today to kind of finish out and do this every day. Yesterday, I did not do the lesson yesterday. So I'm coming on today to kind of catch up and go over what was given in my heart to do. So let's cover this. We're talking about the causes of shame. So I'm going to kind of pivot a little bit. We talked about some of the signs, the symptoms, the manifestations, the spiritual symptoms of the spirit of shame and how it occurs in the natural. I want to talk about some of the causes of shame. And it's not rocket science in a sense, because many of us have experienced shameful situations. Some we have recovered from, right? Some that have taught us a lesson and we were able to bounce back. And then there are others that kind of have kind of covered us like a veil over the years that we've never been able to get over. We've never addressed. We never, taken time to heal from, taken time to be delivered from. And we've kind of, as I started this lesson, talking about repressing shame in our life. So, again, the causes of shame can be family secrets, right? Though, those things that we've witnessed as a family unit that we were told not to share with anyone else. We have the saying, what goes on in this house stays in this house, right? There are personal failures. Poor self-image can be a result of shame. A lot of times when people are born into poverty and, they're not able to afford what we call, delicacies and things that, make us appealing to the eye. A lot of times kids are bullied for the things that they have on, and can be a cause of shame in their life. Some of it stems from addictions such as alcoholism, um, nicotine addiction, um, uh, you know, uh, weed. I know it's legal, but there is things that happen to you when you are addicted to certain substances. Okay. Um, crack has been a long stemming epidemic in many of our communities. There's shame that has been felt not only by community, but by the children that have been affected by the addictions of others. There's been abuse can be the cause of shame. Abuse that may have stemmed from a personal abuse, or even abuse that we've witnessed as a child, of a family member, of a mom, even of a dad, of a sister, of a brother. Financial situations like bankruptcy, unemployment, and even, divorce. They say that 1 out of 2 marriages end in divorce. And having that scarlet letter on your chest that says, I've been married and that marriage failed, can be a source of shame. So, some things that the world has deemed as acceptable as a part of the kingdom culture, it welcomes advertently or inadvertently the spirit of shame. There are things in our communities, even in my community, in the African American community, that we hail as, being a boss itch, right? Or being the it girl, or being very desirable in certain ways and presenting ourselves in certain ways. In later times, when you really understand who you are in God, can be a source of shame. I do want to talk about family secrets and abuse. I want to talk about the story of Tamar and Amnon. And many of you may have heard this story, and I'm going to again be reading from my notes. But Tamar was the daughter of David, and Amnon was the son of David. And Tamar was raped by Amnon. When she comes into Amnon's room, he sends his servants away and begins pressing her for sex. She refuses, citing the law, but as he was stronger than she was, he raped her. He not only did he rape her, instead of making it right, he becomes angry with her and then assaults her and sends her away. So I want to read this story, that not only the perpetrator experienced shame, but also the one who was perpetrated against the victim was shamed because of this situation. This story takes place in 2 Samuel chapter 13. And in this narrative, again, she's raped by her paternal half brother, but her brother nonetheless, who was born to David and Ahinoam, who was from Jezreel. And before fleeing with torn robes to Absalom's house, David is angered by the incident, but he doesn't do anything. Again, remember I said shame can even come from being unprotected. And David, even though he knows about this situation, he doesn't do anything about it. And Amnon is his heir. So he doesn't even address the issue. So let's read it. 2 Samuel chapter 13, beginning at verse 1. It says, after this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister whose name was Tamar. And Amnon, the son of David, loved her. That's an interesting word, love, right? I think there's a thin line between love and lust. We see it all the time. What starts out, what feels like love, inevitably you finally realize that it wasn't really love, because love doesn't hurt. Love causes no pain. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does no evil. But he says that he thought it was love, but in the end of it was lust. Amnon, in verse 2, it says he was so distressed over his sister Tamar that he became sick. He became sick with his lust and sick with his desire. Why? Because she was a virgin. So it wasn't that he loved her. He didn't love her spirit. He didn't love her, just her beauty, but he loved her in a way that he wanted her. And a lot of times men present themselves to women and having, saying that I love you, or using that as a way to get to that young woman. Or even some women have that desire for a man and really don't understand the difference between love and lust. And he says he wanted her. He became so sick with desire that he wanted her. And the only reason he was sick with desire was because she was a virgin. She was a young woman that had not been touched, and it was improper for Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother. And Jonadab was a very crafty man, meaning he was clever. He was shifty. I'd even go so far to say he thought evil. He knew how to devise evil plans. And so he proposed a plan for uh, Amnon to get at Tamar. He says in verse 4, "Why are you, the king's son, becoming thinner day after day? Will you not tell me?" So he was so sick. Amnon was so sick with desire that he would not even eat. Um, love does not hurt like that. Love causes you to even continue to take care of yourself. It says, Amnon said to him, "I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." And so Jonadab told him, he says, "Lie down on your bed and pretend to be ill. And when your father comes to see you, say to him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and give me food and prepare the food in my sight, that I may see it and eat it from her hand.'" So even that scheme, I mean, think about it. He says that he loved her, but he allowed his temptations and his lack of self-control to put his sister, his half-sister, in a vulnerable situation. It says, "Please let her come and make a couple cakes for me in my sight, that I may eat from her hand." And really want you to read this full chapter. I'm going to skip down and go down to verse 9. And it says that she took the pan and placed them out before him, but he refused to eat. Then Amnon said, "Have everyone go out from me." So there were other people in their presence, which was a right thing to do. In the presence of others, it's hard to violate someone when you're in the presence of others. And I say this, and I still don't understand, how in ministry a man can, minister to a woman who's not his wife outside of the presence of others. Just welcoming temptation, welcoming temptation. The Bible says to put no confidence in our flesh. I just don't understand it. How can you, a man, with born in this flesh, knowing that you should not tempt this flesh, put someone else who you're in ministry with or who you're over in ministry in a vulnerable situation like that? How many times have we heard this story? "Oh, I was having a counseling session and they took advantage of me." But here he is, he sends everybody away. And it says in verse 10, Amnon said to Tamar, "Bring the food into the bedroom, that I may eat from your..." Now he's setting this whole stage up to prepare to violate this girl. He had a whole plan in sight. And when she had brought them to him to eat, he took hold of her. He says, "Come lie with me, my sister." And the Bible says in verse 12 that she said, "No, do not force me, for no such thing should be done in Israel." Listen, do not do this disgraceful thing. Do not do this thing that will shame me. In verse 13, she says, "And where could I take my shame?" She was shamed. She knew that this act would cause her shame. "And as for you, you would be like one of the fools in Israel. So not only would I be shamed, but you also would experience shame because of this act that you're doing." However, he would not listen to her voice, and because he was stronger than she was, he forced her and lay with her. And listen in verse 15, which is probably the worst part of this story, because he could have, in a sense, made it right. Because there were laws at that time that, in certain circumstances, the nearest relative would be allowed to marry a close relative in those times. Now we ain't talking about today, okay? In those times, it says in verse 15, "And then he hated her." That was not love. That was not love. So that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And then Amnon said to her, "Arise and be gone." He threw her out. He kicked her out of his presence. And the shame, the disgrace, the humiliation she must have felt. She said to him, "No, indeed, this evil of sending me away is worse. It's worse than the other that you have done to me." But he would not listen to her, and says that he kicked her out, away from her, and he bolted the door behind her. This is a family shame that she experienced. And not just that, but he was ashamed of what he had done, so much so that it tormented his soul, and he couldn't stand her because he violated her, but yet he could not stand her. These are the things that cause shame in a family, the secrets that are held behind closed doors. And her own father didn't do anything knowing what had happened to his daughter. It took her brother, to exact revenge for doing what he did to his sister. This is a shameful and disgraceful situation. And it destroys families. It destroys self-esteem. It influences societies. It influences homes and families. It destroys authenticity of who you are and who you were meant to be. Shameful situations that occur in our lives. Shame, family secrets, personal failures, abuse, rape. And I remember being raped myself at the age of 18. And I remember that feeling of being able to get away. And I hopped in my car and I was hysterically crying. And I drove to the nearest police station. But I couldn't go in. I was so ashamed. And I remember someone, coming up to the car, driving by the car, and they were like, "Are you okay?" And I didn't say anything. And I was so hysterical. And I ended up, driving myself home. And I got home and I was supposed to go into work that day. And I remember getting home and I called the lady at my job, told her I was not going to be going in. And I was still just hysterical and crying. And then I did call the police once I got home, and they did come, to my residence and pick me up. But even that was shameful because we lived across from our high school, like across the park from my high school. And I remember the children seeing the police car at our house and me getting in the police. It was just a shameful situation. And it gets worse. I prosecuted my rapist, okay? And the trial was not any better, okay? The clothes that I had on, I had to bring them in, and I was fully dressed because I had to go into work. And this wasn't a romantic person, and never been intimate with this person, never alluded to intimacy with this person. And I remember the questions, that were asked on the stand, and it was meant to humiliate me even further. And I felt so strong being able to stand up to my accuser and prosecute him. And, I remember even having nightmares, of things crawling under the sheets of my bed. So this shame, these attacks, this abuse that have caused you shame that you're holding in, you've got to address them. You've got to address them. You've got to attack it head on. Whatever that means for you, you've got to attack it head on. These are causes of shame and humiliation. And remember, shame is it is a painful feeling of humiliation or distress caused by wrong or foolish behavior. Okay, it is the feelings of shame is likened unto a continuum with death. It's how a body decomposes after burial. So you can't continue to repress the shame that you feel by the things that you've experienced in life, whether you caused or have done, or that were caused and done by you. And so I'm going to pray, and I want you to tune in to the next episode of this shame series. And I'm going to be going into depth of every single symptom that shame brings in our life. Because maybe you don't realize that there are some things that you are dealing with that you have not experienced or taken control or confronted head on. And it may cause you to have to deal with some things that you may have suppressed, that your family has suppressed, and it does us no good to continue to do that. So, Father, I thank you for this here word, and I thank you for the opportunity to share with your people and those who don't know you and the pardon of their sins. Maybe they're dealing with this shame today, and they've been going through situations in their life that have caused them to just be tormented and brought to a place that they can no longer deal. They can't operate. They don't understand what's going on. Lord, let the next episodes that come after this be able to share with them what it is they need to look for to know that not only are they experiencing symptoms of shame and manifestations of shame, but you are the answer. You are the remedy. You bore our shame and you wore our iniquity. You took on our face of humiliation. You bore them when you were nailed to that cross, and you were shamed and deflected and depicted as and tormented before your death. God, we thank you for your son, Jesus. And we give you honor and praise. Tune in to the next version. Feel free to follow our playlist. I look forward to seeing you on tomorrow. See you later.